Hello, everyone. My name is Paolo Barlera. I'm the interim director of the Italian Cultural Institute in New York. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to a series of new webinars organized by the Italian Cultural Institute and entitled Until Further Notice, in which we'll try to explore some issues of contemporary art in this period of uncommon and extraordinary circumstances. The idea of the series was developed by art critic Maurita Cardone, who joins us from Italy, and I want to thank her for her role in planning and coordinating the entire series. Let me also welcome and thank today's participants, Fiamma Montezemolo, who joins us from California, and Eugenio Tibaldi, who joins us from Torino, Italy. As you can see, we span today across many time zones, hoping to create a truly international event. But for more on this, and for moderating the conversation with the two artists, I leave the screen and the microphone to Maurita Cardone. Thank you.
Pleasure of having with us two incredible Italian artists, which work I really love and admire. Fiamma Montezemolo joining us from San Francisco, and Eugenio Tibaldi joining us from Torino. I'm going to briefly introduce them, and then we'll start right away with the conversation. While we will be talking, I will show some images of their work just to show you what kind of work they do. We're not going to spend too much time on the specific works, but if you are curious, you want to know more about their works, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box that you should have in your Zoom toolbar. And also at the end of the conversation, we're going to have some time for questions. So again, you're going to have to use that box and stay with us until the end. Fiamma Montezemolo is both an artist and an anthropologist. She mixes different media, techniques, and aesthetics in her works, which are often created in relation to specific social and geographical contexts. Fiamma is originally from Rome, where she's currently represented by Magazzino Gallery, but for 6 years she lived in Tijuana on the US-Mexico border, where she researched topics of migration and frontiers. Since 2009, she has been living in San Francisco, where she teaches at California Davis University and where she received the Headland Center for the Arts residency. Eugenio Tibaldi is a visual artist who has always been drawn to dynamics and aesthetics of the margins, as well as to the complex relationship between the economy and the contemporary landscape. In Tibaldi's work, the outskirts are understood as a condition that is often more mental than geographical, a procedural dynamic that, applied to the artistic research, allows the emergence of alternative aesthetics. In recent years, he has created projects in Istanbul, Cairo, Berlin, La Habana, Caracas, Tirana, Addis Abeba, and in many more territories. He is represented by Galleria Umberto Di Marino in Naples. And in 2019, the city of Milan awarded him with the Milano Leonardo 500 prize. And in 2011, he was the recipient of the American Academy in Rome Fellowship. Hello, Fiamma and Eugenio. Thank you for being here.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So I want to start this conversation by setting the context of what we would be talking about tonight. And so the situation is what we have been living in the past few months. We all have experienced a radical transformation of our everyday life. And I want to ask you, since you were in two different places, very different ones. Eugenio was in Torino during the lockdown, and Fiamma was in San Francisco under the shelter-in-place order. So I want to ask you, how was your everyday life during those months at the beginning of the crisis? What changed in your everyday life? Fiamma, you want to start?
So I was and I still am in San Francisco. And we basically have been sheltering in place for since you guys start in Italy, so since March. So it's been a long time. Now we can go out, but there are still a lot of things that are closed. You cannot eat inside of restaurants. You cannot go to the hairdresser. You cannot, in some places you can do the nails outside. They're thinking to open up again, but with a lot of cautious, because as you guys know, in the United States, we had 200,000 deaths, which is not a small number. And so we have been basically having this new, absolutely crazy routine for the last 6-7 months, to which you should add the fires that basically put us in a very, very precarious situation, because you could not, in any case, go outside because of the air quality. So it's been tough, and my routine has been just to reorganize my work and my studio in the house, with a child. So he has his own school, with a husband who is teaching actively in UC Davis in anthropology. So we are 3 distributed in the 3 rooms and trying to work as we can.
Since you mentioned the fires, maybe you want to say that the picture you have behind you is actually you want to say something about it?
The picture that I have behind me, I just took it a couple of weeks ago when there was the really horrible fires that basically is eating California alive. And this fire basically, for a series of circumstances, basically the smoke was so low in the city that we woke up and until 4 in the afternoon, it was dark and red. There was no sun. So you could see just the flames and basically the color coming from the flames and the smoke. So the black and the red comes from that. And it was really an unsettling experience, I have to say.
Eugenio.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Thank you, Maurita, for this invitation, and also thanks, Fiamma, for sharing this moment, and thank you, Paolo and the Italian Institute for this focus. Yes, well, the lockdown was a very complex period for me, because I didn't immediately realize what was happening and the size of this event will take. I prefer to believe everything is resolved in a couple of days, but no, and all of a sudden I had stopped the travel and the research was carrying out, and I tried to find a new work balance. But it wasn't easy for me, because normally I use a lot of input outside in my work, and stay alone in the studio for me is really, really hard. And as the day went by, I had the perception of the loss of control over the relationship between space and time. And also I suffered a strong pressure for information that overcame and overwhelmed a real information about the COVID-19. And I went through very different phases, optimistic, pessimistic, from psychoanalysis and pyjama sofa and TV, and now, and to date, I'm still not sure that I can distinguish the damages and the lesson brought by this event. But, well, now the lockdown is over, and okay.
Hopefully for good.
Yeah. And also, I'm really happy because I have 2 children, and I'm very happy the school have started 1 week ago, because it's really more simple for me to take another people of work.
So actually, Eugenio touched a little bit on how his work routine changed, but Fiamma didn't. So I was going to ask about this. Has your work been affected by the new normal, and has your artistic practice changed as a result of the transformation of your everyday life?
I had to say that in general, I don't like to work on with a sense of urgency, in the sense that I definitely need a deadline to produce work, because otherwise I get lost. But I don't like the fact, I'm not a journalist, so I don't relate to the word as something that happens and I have to talk about it in my work, no? So in this sense, it didn't affect the work, but I think unconsciously, the substrata of my way of thinking, probably it did, because I noticed that I start working, when all of this started, I was working on the concept of self-portrait, which I hate. So I was interested in see how I can make a self-portrait, hating self-portrait. And then I start working on a photographer that I love, Italian photographer, Tina Modotti. And then now I see that I'm moving toward, like, I'm reading a book called, I don't know if you can see it. No, maybe
no, not really.
No. Anyway.
Brief story of humankind.
Sapiens. And now, so I'm just starting to reason on the species, no, of the sapiens. So it's like my interest moved from a more specific one to a more universal, for the humans, obviously, approach. Because what I feel about this incredible experience we are living is that it's affecting all of us. And it's like, it didn't happen for a while that something in such a radical way from night to day touched all our lives. I think that's very interesting. And they put stresses and other, in new ways, what we conceive as difference and similitudes. How can we deal with this basically all over the place experience? I think that's the most interesting part for me about this lockdown, about this virus, about this situation.
Eugenio, do you want to add something about how your practice has been affected, or maybe it hasn't at all?
Yes, I didn't have a normal typology of work. My work practice changed and reshaped every project, because for me it's important the output, the input outside me in the territory where I live, I work. For this reason, I still don't know what will bring with me from this period. I tend to recognize the change only in a second reading. I need a little bit of distance to understand. And for sure, I had to deal with my inner world. This more private aspect had already begun to push, not during the lockdown, but around 1 year ago. And oh, yes, and the result is this particular project is my last installation in the Fiammas in Rome, and with this one I try to represent a sort of a refuge and a sort of my idea for inner world. And yes, I think this is the most important change in the lockdown and during the pandemic time.
So in separate conversations that I had with you guys, you both mentioned, and I thought it was really interesting that you had the same reaction. You both mentioned that when this first started, you were contacted by journalists or other people that wanted to ask your opinion, that wanted to know how you felt, they want you to kind of communicate what you felt about that moment. But you didn't feel like you wanted to be part of the public debate. You would rather stay silent. You chose silence. So I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about that choice, why you felt that way? Fiamma, you want to start?
Yeah, first of all, there was a rush to create contents for all the platforms that have been dormant for all these years. So the artists in this case are always good to fill in the gaps, no? And so I thought it was not my job to do that. Second, I just did one thing for Artribune, actually, in which they asked me a podcast about the situation, and I sent 5 minutes of silence, no? In the sense I didn't talk. Because honestly, what is to be said? We are not journalists again. We are not epidemiologists. We are not scientists. We need specialists talking. We don't need to give opinion. I mean, would be an opinion, wouldn't be really a serious thought on what's going on now. Because you can talk about the personal situation of how you're in your house with your family, how your routine changes, but more than that, what can you say? So it didn't make much sense to just comment on a virus that should be commented by mainly doctors, honestly, from my point of view. I don't know, Eugenio, what do you think?
Oh, yes, I'm very much agree with Fiamma, and I read and heard more nonsense during the lockdown than in the rest of my life. But I said some too, sure. When the lockdown started, okay, stop. Now it's not important, but I believe the time of artistic reasoning are very distant from the time of emergency, of the journalism. I understood immediately that I did not have the competence to feel, avoid and fear that determined the request for a content that was addressed to the world of culture. And for this reason, I prefer to fight in silence in my studio my fear of disappearing, because I think this is the real problem for the artist, the fear of disappearing in this period.
Right. The fear of disappearing is interesting that despite that fear, you didn't feel the need to be, on the media or to be visible in that period of time. So I really appreciate that choice, actually.
I like what he says, because what Eugenio says, because in some way I had the same feeling, the fear of disappearing, no? But the fear, the opposite is not to appear on media.
Right.
In that sense, I agree with Eugenio. I think for me the opposite is, for example, to have a show, to show not myself, which I don't care about, but my work.
Yeah.
That is the way, not disappearing.
Yeah. So,
right?
sure.
Not myself. I mean, I don't need to appear in the media. That's not my main interest. My main interest is that the work appears, because it's a message that hopefully is going to last.
Yes, during the lockdown, the media don't want to, or don't are interested at my work, but in my opinion about the pandemic, it's nothing.
Irrelevant.
Have fear and stop, and I don't understand the situation. And
I totally agree.
it's important.
Yeah. So this brings me to another question I wanted to ask you. So Fiamma is an anthropologist. Eugenio is not an anthropologist, but he brings to his work a certain anthropological approach. But at the same time, you seem to have a different approach to reality. Eugenio says he's not interested in reality. That's something he often says, that he is not interested in reality at all, but in how reality is perceived. And from those perceptions, he draws a more universal meaning. While Fiamma seems to have a more observational approach to reality, maybe in coherence with her being an anthropologist, but she then makes the reality hers, very intimate, personal. So I'm wondering, given these two different approaches, what are you making of the current reality? How are you approaching it? Is this moment offering you any insight or material for your research?
You want me to start? I don't know. As I was telling you, I think it's in more subtle and long-term influence, which is part again of the idea that I'm not a journalist, so I don't really care about what I mean, I care what's going on, but it's not my job to comment it or to take it in my work. I'm quite sure that in our work there's gonna be an influence on the long term. How this influence is gonna play out specifically, I don't know. My relation with reality is, if you want, maybe it's the opposite process that Eugenio has. So, for example, this is the Progetto Perucati, who was one of the director of the Santo Stefano prison, which is one of the examples of the Panopticon prison in Italy, which is a fantastic prison, which is horrible, fantastic architecture composition. And basically, it's a good example. So the work starts from a reality, which was the prison. And then from my idea that through images, I wanted to alter that reality. So it's, instead of having more an approach of an activist approach, if you want, going and change reality as an artist, I can do it on the personal level. As an artist, I prefer to work with the concept of the imagination. So to bring images that, in this case, you have the panopticon, which the concept is to look always toward the central tower, which is the tower of the power, where you are controlled from. And my idea was to substitute the central tower with an iPad containing the images dreamt or written about the prisoners that were especially in the fascist period, the political prisoners, that mention in letters or in diaries that they would have liked to see instead of the guard. So the sea, the kids playing, the sun, the plants. You have to think that the prison is located in a magnificent island, if you want, in the middle of the sea, in front of Italy. So it's Ventotene basically is the closest one to Santo Stefano, and it's really an incredible place. So my idea was to substitute the reality of power with the reality of desire. So that's how I try to prescient what the constrictions of reality. And art helps me to do that. I don't know, Eugenio, how you relate to
that. It's fun because this is another incredible point of contact for me and you, because I love Ventotene. It's a sort of a second house for me. I spend a lot of time in the island and also a lot of time in the Borbonic Panopticon in the Santo Stefano, and a really evocative place, and it's incredible. But yes, for me the situation is a little bit more complex. It's not only for the pandemic, because the last 20 years have led to a violent acceleration in the process of change. And the pandemic is only one aspect. Yeah. I think is a variable. It certainly is not the most important. If we think about a racial problem, or to sexual discrimination, to war, to poverty, to migration, or climate change, all of this is part of this era, for these historical periods. And the fringe community that I love to study are involved in this change and are often cogs in a powerful engine, but this powerful engine is driven by hardware. And my idea is that the periphery does the dirty work of evolution, and the trace of that work are neither systematized or narrated. And for me it's important, this aspect, and in this moment I think for the idea of the margin and the idea of the reality is different, because it's the perception of the reality for the people living in the margin, the suburb, and the people living in the center. And at the same time, I love to do this. I love to study this part. If you, okay, I will try to find an example. Okay, if we think of the Middle Age, we are full of castle. In every hill, full of royal house, full of big castle, but we don't have a village of wood house when they were around the castle, no? The wood house, and the wood house is the structure to support and allow the existence of the castle. Okay, and I love studying this typology of area, and in this period, this typology of area are involved in every part of this incredible change, not only in the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, this opens up to another question actually that I wanted to ask, because you both have this interest for, in Fiamma's case, it's more like borders, more like a frontier, while in Eugenio's case, it's more a margin, I would say maybe the outskirts. But you both have a similar interest in this idea of borders. In Fiamma's case, it's more like a metaphorical idea that evolves into a physical frontier. Eugenio, again, is more the fringes of society, though he has a very specific definition of that. Can you both explain what is that interests you in this idea of borders or margins, and why?
You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been borders all my life, basically, because I started working as an anthropologist on identity and Chicanism, so the Mexican Americans, and then the Zapatists in Mexico. And I was very interested also in Tijuana, of course, in the geopolitical borders after that. So I started with identity, so a more metaphorical understanding of the border, then it became more geopolitical. I've been in Tijuana, which we were mentioning, for 6 years, working there. And then it became more a disciplinary border, no? I wanted to cross border disciplinary, so I went from anthropology to art. And why did I want to art? Because retaking Elisabeth Grosz, whom is a philosopher I love, that reflects on Deleuze, she says that basically the first gesture of art is the reconstruction of the frame, so a sort of border, no? And the frame is what allows you as an artist to establish a territory out of the chaos of the earth. So the boundary, the frame, create the territory. At the same time as the power of bringing back that territory, that frame, the framing, back to the, let's say, the unwrenched territories. So this gesture of framing and the framing, creating border and taking away the border, is what interests me with the art. I feel that all the artists, in some way, in one way or the other, Eugenio, me, whomever, attempt to put a sort of Duchampian frame, in which you have Magritte's frame, in which you are pushed to intensify some sort of territory for a moment. Territory can be not a real territory, it can be an object, can be a situation, can be a performance. So that's what interests me in this moment of my life about art.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, for me it's strange because my passion started many years ago, and because I come from a provincial town, little town in the northern Italy, and from a very young age I developed a great curiosity toward the periphery of the margin. In the past I tried to remember the exact moment, and I think it's the one night my mother took me and my brother to a gypsy camp, and he ordered us not to get out of the car, please, okay? And when she put some boxes on the floor, I watched it from the window, an aesthetic never seen before, no? A new kind of aesthetic. And I was full of curiosity and fear. And I remember I going back there by bicycle secretly to my parents, from my parents. And I think it started from there. And then for me another important moment is in 2000, I moved to the Napolitan hinterland, where I had for an idea of project. I, in my mind, okay, I want to move to Naples for 1 year for study the idea of the hinterland, no? And where I had my basis in Napoli for 16 years. And from there, I started to have a sort of anthropological approach in my research. I will say made of an active observation, a reconnaissance in the territory considered be serious. In my view, they are the most plastic and dynamic part of the world. And also, contrary to what Mark Auge claims, I don't see the suburb as a non-place. For me, the suburb is a sort of a super place. Its territory always pregnant, able to procreate a new idea of aesthetic, a new idea of life, a sort of a gap. No? In particular, from the ability of some territory to allow life to alternative aesthetic and imprecise object, not exactly object. And this typology of aesthetic for me, it's really interesting, and it's a part of my research. And I try, the first time I try to make a sort of catalogation of these aesthetics. And with painting, because I born a painter many years ago, and with photograph and other media. And now I try to put the dynamics of the suburb in the practice of my work. I realize my installation used the law of the suburb. Mm. And I think it's a sort of one big project with more territories, more process, but it's only a one big evolution of the same idea in my work.
I find it interesting that borders and suburbs or outskirts are both being very much affected by the crisis that we are experiencing now. So, as we mentioned, Fiamma spent some time in Tijuana, and that's actually paradoxical from my point of view, the only border that now is open between the United States and Mexico. But you know, it's interesting how during the pandemic, borders have been closing everywhere. We're experiencing an unprecedented closure of borders. So first of all, I want to show you a minute of Fiamma's work in Tijuana, and then I want to ask a question to Fiamma. So give me a second so I can share the screen with you again, and I'll show you 1 minute or so of this work traces.
You too have your own story, your own biography. You too were born in one place, and sooner or later you'll pass away in another. You too bring trouble to some and joy to others. You too live your ambivalences, like many do. If seen from below, as if from a low-angle shot, you signify limits, omnipotence. If seen from above, in a bird's eye view, you signify power, security, dominion.
This is a work Fiamma did in 2012, right, Fiamma?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the artist is here kind of talking directly, addressing directly the wall. So there is a personalization of the wall. Fiamma, if you want to say something about the work, go ahead. But also I wanted to ask you about the idea of borders in your work, because again, we're experiencing this unprecedented closure of borders. And I wonder if you think that the way we perceive or use the borders will change in the future, and if it will change your personal approach in your work to the idea of borders as a result of what we're experiencing nowadays.
Well, I think, I mean, in this specific case, is a 20 minutes video, which is basically a video essay on the concept of border and really the geophysical space that is between Tijuana and San Diego, so between Mexico and California, the United States, the most crossed border in the world, I think. So is where I lived. So I shot this video in 24 hours as it were a person. So the idea was that the wall itself was a person, and not just a person, a macho, I would say, no? A very macho person. So it was, the point of view is a woman, is actually a Mexican-American woman that is the voiceover. That's why it's important, because basically because I made the script to the wall, basically describing his life and her life depending on him, because there is a codependency in both sides, not the United States and Mexico. And it's interesting because I try to show all the personality of the absurdity of this border, of this wall. So it's like dramatic, there is the crossing, the illegal crossing, there is the part that is more ironic. So for example, Mexican that make bodybuilding with the border. They use the border as a gym, or plants that grow higher, Mexican plants that represent Mexico also in the flag, that grow higher than the border, the physical wall itself. So you have all these aspects that I lived daily, basically crossing the border, because I used to teach in both sides, that are very powerful, I think. And it's a work that really went from universities to galleries to museums, because it's very plastic. And the sad, if you want, results is that, for example, since Trump got into power, it has been shown even more. So after 8 years that they made it, it came back like with a revenge, no? And that is the result of the American politics today, no? The US politics. So how the border has been there for me all the time. So for me, it's not a new news. But obviously now there is a revitalization, if you want, in some way, of nationalism through borders created through healthy, unhealthy, COVID, no COVID. So it becomes also an excuse to block or direct or create alliances between certain kind of blocks of nations. The United States is in one of the most isolated period of its life because of several reasons, not just because of a health crisis, as we know, but politically. So it's, in this sense, it's interesting for me, because there is a revitalization of the border as I don't like it, not as I like it, no? Because I like the border or the frame that can be unframed, that can be crossed. I don't like the border that closes. And so between Mexico and the United States, it's actually not open. It's open just to essential workers at the moment, that you can define as you want. Business, maybe, no?
Still, it's something. Moving to Eugenio's work, again, Eugenio has this interest for borders, but his idea of borders is more towards the side, the hand of margins, outskirts. So, and again, I think in this pandemic, we're experiencing something that is very much changing our relationship and the relationship between the center and the outskirts. So many people are actually moving away from big cities and are moving to the suburbs. So I'm wondering if you think, Eugenio, that the dynamics between the center and the margins, between urban areas and outskirts, will change as a consequence of what we're experiencing, and if that's going to change your approach to the suburbs or the way you work in the suburbs.
Yes, but the margin and the periphery for me, before being a physical place, is a sort of a mental place. But sure, is not a place you chose. And often people living in the suburb, they work all their lives to get out of this condition, because the idea of the margin is a sort of a mental condition, and the people work for go out. And for this reason, it's not to be considered a bucolic aspect for the margin. Every place, every research has increased my ability to read the world, the dynamics of the world. And for this reason, I consider this research urgent for me, for my person. And I don't think it's urgent for others. And I hope doesn't. During these years, I have been lucky to travel a lot, and I hope can continue to do my job away from any kind of pressure and attention. I hope this doesn't change. I don't want attention about my work, because I think that it's only a sort of a personal reflection. No? Yes, this image is from Caracas, and it's interesting because it's different to the border, no? And also this is the suburb in Naples, is the belt of Naples, and it's mixed, the legal and illegal area. It's not a border. This is the map of the street for Exodus in the Vesuvio. It's a onyx with crazy.
Beautiful, I love the
Yes, it's for me. It's a sort of every place is important before for me, no? For my idea of the work, from my idea to spend my life in this research.
All right.
I want to say something about Eugenio's work. I think that the conception of the margin for Eugenio is not just about the outskirts, it's not about the physical space outside. And I want to underline that because I really like that about his work. I think is also a mental predisposition of looking for something that is not just of the order of subalternity. I think he looks for something more, no?
Yes, it's fun because the margin can change, change form, can change shape, but don't that. It's impossible the margin that, because it's that margin that the center point, no? And if you want to exist of the center of the city, the center of economy, need the margin.
Yeah.
I think it's a most old story in the world, you know. It's the pyramid of the society, you know, and the margin is not in the back, but in middle part, and every people live in this condition, in that condition, want to grow up. And I love this kind of movement because it's energy, it's full of energy, no, and I think it's the possibility to change the aesthetic representation to create a new idea of the world.
Yeah.
Because in the top of the pyramid, the people don't want to change. Never. It's perfect. If you stay in the top, it's okay. don't have any problem, and it's okay.
Well, speaking of changes and in a way of revolutions, You both say that you don't make social art, but at the same time you do admit that your work might have a social relevance at one point after. And you both have some interest in social dynamics. So I'm wondering, what do you make of what is going on right now in the States and elsewhere in the world, all this social conflict that is arising? Is this something that interests you? Is this something that you think art, or your art and art in general, should be able to reflect, or maybe not?
From my point of view, in my personal life, I like a sort of activism, to participate, to follow, and I follow very closely. And I do my own things to participate as a citizen. But in my art, I prefer to think the political in more detached ways. So as I was telling you before, it doesn't come to me to go out and make a documentary about the protest, to which I participate in some of them, of course, not all of them. But in my art, it influences in obliquous ways. Okay, so I do not consider myself a social artist because I don't want to go outside and change the world. It's not what I feel is my job. My job is to, if you want to change the world, through the imagination, but not to a super active position. And for example, I don't know, you wanted to talk about the Sacco e Vanzetti piece I made once, no?
Yes, I'm gonna send it.
It's a video installation that is, it talks about these political prisoners that were Sacco e Vanzetti, that basically were anarchists that have been put on the electric chairs in the 20s, and at the end of the 20s, and after a long dramatic period of accusations and period of defense, and there've been a lot of sit-ins and protests at the time, but at the end the court decided they were guilty of assaulting and killing someone in a robbery. In the reality, they were migrants, Italians, not welcome, and anarchists on top of all. So it was the worst of the worst for the moment. Now would be, you know, I don't know, the Arabs or the Mexican. You can choose your otherness historically in different moments, the same gestures. So they were. So what I did, I recreated the court, the moment of the judgment in a video installation that was on the floor of the gallery of the museum, and was in a spiral with the words of in blue, white, and red that were the court, the defense, and the own prisoners talking. So and those colors are the colors of the American flag, obviously, no? So there is these big spirals that coincide at the end, and they die at the center, and then they reemerge as a flag of the anarchist movement. So for me, that's political art. I think about these questions of politics, of migration, on exclusion, of anarchism, through a piece, though, that talks about the 20s. But for me, it's very actual. It's something that could happen today. So in this sense that we see in other circumstances, for example, we had the Brianna moment yesterday, which was again very sad. This African-American woman killed in her house in her 20s without real why, and people that have not been prosecuted, basically, no? Police that haven't been prosecuted. So there is a very hot situation in the States now. I think that as a private citizen, for me, is very important. And I think it influenced me, but through this oblique sight, oblique regard, no? Sguardo in Italiano.
Okay. Oh, yeah. It's really interesting. And yes, and also I hope for my work in the future, I hope a future for my work for social contribution, but I'm not sure now. But I have one question for Maurita. You know one important artwork that is not social?
Well, maybe not.
Yes, I think this is the point. When the society begins to interact with the work, then work begins its own path. Contemporary art has lost the real function for a long time ago, and this determines its great freedom and enormous limit at the same time. The artist is free from doing something useful, but the work, to remain, to exist, he must be able to grasp something necessary and fundamental. And for this reason, I think that a good art job is a sort of alchemy and can give a contribution for the society. But this is independently from the artist and the reason who did it. I think so.
Oh, that's great. We're getting towards the end. Is there any question from the audience? If not, I can go on and ask questions forever. But if you want to ask questions, this is the time to do so. In the meantime, we're going to keep chatting. I guess I had one more question about the art becoming more or less urgent in this moment, but I believe you have already answered that question, because what you were saying is exactly going towards that way. So I want to ask you a more practical question at this point. Since museums and galleries are still not fully open, or they're slowly starting to reopen, and with very limited resources, by the way, smaller institutions are struggling to stay afloat. The situation is not easy in general for the art world. I'm wondering if you think that this situation will affect the ability of artists around the world to live off their work, and if you think this will affect you directly, and as a consequence, if you think that the art world should think about different ways to make a business out of art. So if art fairs are cancelled, galleries are not open or are open with limited audience, is there anything else that we can do or they should be doing? And do you think this will actually affect you?
From my point of view, could be a good occasion to go back to more experimentation and less commercial concerns. It's like lately it's been all about how commercially can we sell or buy art. It's been the main focus, which has never been my focus. This is why I'm very happy to have a job in the university, so I'm more autonomous, if you want. No? For me, it was really a point to have an autonomy that will allow me, as Eugenio said, not to be concerned with the fashion of the moment or the whatever is trendy to make a living, basically, through the arts. No, which is not, it doesn't mean that it's not that I'm against the market, but it's not my main concern. And so in this sense, I think that to have big fairs now is impossible. So I think, and sometimes I hope that the curators and the museums are going to go back to the studios, which they don't do it often, and visit us in our environment. I don't know, Eugenio, what do you think? What do you think, Eugenio?
Yes. The terms crisis, if I'm not mistaken, in Greek means possibility. Yeah, and personally, I don't see something beautiful in the pandemic. I don't see it. For me, it's not a possibility. But we'll see. And about the art system, I think the world of gallery and the museum was already increases for some time. Over the past 40 years, they have linked the rules of art of the economy. But art and economy have different reaction time. And they also last differently in history. And I think one possibility, maybe he just need to change the point of view of those who want to approach the artistic research. I think it's possible to have an approach without thinking of an economic gain, but of an enrichment on a personal level, a sharing of the path with the artist and with his thoughts. I think it's possible to understand the artist is a sort of a labor, no? It's a sort of employed in the art world, and every time the artist spend is for the work, also during their normal life, and it's incredible, no? And this relationship with economy, for me, it's really hard because I think it's not possible to connect these two levels. Because I think if I want an incredible economical level, I don't choose the artist's life. I choose another typology of work. I think so. But we'll see, no? We'll see.
We'll see, we'll see. Strange times are ahead of us.
Hard
times, yes, definitely. I think we're running out of time. I don't see any questions, so I'm gonna wrap up. I just wanted to say that if you want to see more of Eugenios' work, he has a show opening next week in Telese Terme, near Benevento, while Fiamma, she will be talking about public art at the 5th study day organized by Artline on October 7th at Palazzo Reale in Milan. And if you want to see more of their work, you can obviously follow them on Instagram or go to their websites, fiammamontezemolo.com and eugeniotibaldi.com. I hope you enjoyed this meeting today. We're going to be back on October 8th when we are going to have 2 major Italian galleries joining us. So stay tuned. We are going to keep you posted. Thank you, Paolo, for hosting this beautiful event.
Fiamma, Eugenio, and Maurita for the very informative and insightful conversation. Good luck with your activities, and we hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to you, Paolo, the Institute, and Maurita.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Enjoy the rest of your day.